Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you all. How is your metabolism today? Still remember? Okay, a few remarks. Could everybody please put their mobile phone on silent mode, and then we'll commence the third annual Field Service Forum. And I also would like to ask you, during the day we're having some fantastic speakers, and we're going to encourage you to ask questions. And we have a microphone running around in the room, so everybody can interrupt and ask questions. So this is the third Field Service Conference. And actually yesterday when I was walking around to the people and I introduced myself, my name is Koen Jeukens and I work for Bosch and I'm in sales. And when I mentioned this yesterday to a few people, they said, oh, you're from the dark side. Well, actually, I've been in the field service domain for 20 years, and actually 5 years ago I made the switch from service to sales. Because actually when I worked in service for 20 years, we've done fantastic stuff. We're doing good stuff, operational excellence, service excellence, we're serving customers, we're helping customers, but we have a fantastic value proposition, and at each conference I've been attending for the last 15 years, we hear we can do so much more with service. But something kept nagging to me. What is it? If we have such a fantastic value proposition, we have fantastic profit margins, everybody in sales is jealous of our profit margin, everybody in sales is jealous of the number of customer touch points we have, but still the value promise we have from a field service domains, how does that end up into the sales domain and how is it picked up? So that kept nagging me. I tried to change this from within sales, from within service. And I actually found out, if I want to be a duck, I need to start quacking like a duck, so I actually moved to sales. And actually being in sales and looking at the service domain from a sales perspective, that's quite different. One of the biggest differences I see in organizations is, when I have a service department and I have a sales department, many cases discussions are between us and them. But to really tap into the potential of service, we need to bring them together. And one of the moves for me was actually move towards the sales domain. And I want to start with a poll. One of the questions is, if from a service domain we are contributing so much to the profit of the organization, I ask, is your service organization, is it modeled as a cost center or a profit center or somebody else? I would want to raise some arms. Whose service department is modeled as a cost center? As a profit center? As something else? Okay. As a sales organization. Well, one of the new words, I already used the word contribute. Well, if you start looking at your service organization as a contributing center, then the dynamics between sales and service will rapidly change. It is not us against them, because as a service department, if you model yourself as a profit center and you start competing with profit against sales, stop, you'll lose. They've been in this business for many, many years. They've got the cloud, they've got C-level presence, you don't. So if you start competing as a service department on profit against your salespeople and want to add sales capabilities to your service department, it's a very hard sell. On the other hand, many service organizations have already experienced, if we have these customer touch points, why am I not going to use my field service engineers as sales light? Who has experimented with giving sales targets to field engineers? Did that work? In many cases, is the service engineer happy in doing sales? No. Why?
It's not the base of his personality.
The DNA. The DNA is different. Salespeople have a different DNA, where service people, they want to help the customer, they want to fix the technology. And sales, I only want your money. It's different. It's a different DNA. But on the other hand, if I look at the agenda, it's all about change. Yesterday we heard about change. We have a fantastic value proposition. If I look at the agenda, it's IoT, it's big data, it's communication, it's new mobility tools. From all the 8 types of change we've seen yesterday, mostly we're focusing on 2, technology and tasks. But if we really want to tap into the proposition we have as sales of making this a better world, we need to go into the structure type of change. But if we want to do that, we as service people have to make a mind shift to get on the same level of salespeople to get our ideas across. So when I said sales, when they're looking at a service organization, they love our margins. They want to, me too. They talk about touch points. But on the downside, sales is always talking about conversion, and conversion of an opportunity into a sale. And that's basically the thing where an engineer is feeling unhappy. He wants to be the hero on site. He wants to fix the customer without the commercial objectives. So what can we do? Use the customer feedback, collect it. Big data is on the agenda. Information from a field service engineer is like big data. It is high quality data. It's based on trust. It's based on fixing a customer. Retrieve it into your organization. And now comes the big trick. Where do you store that information? Because many engineers know that when they see a lead and they pass it on to sales, what happens with that lead? Oops. Yeah, because it's peanuts. It's a lot of leads, and they're all small. Most in the domain of operational expense, where the salespeople want to have the big picture. Well, try something new. Feed that data into existing structures like your marketing department. Because I can tell you from a sales perspective, marketing does not know customers. They lost it. The changes in society where customers are becoming more and more individual. Marketing is based on large concepts and channels and segmentation. Well, technology these days, especially technology which we have from a field service domain, if we tap that into our marketing organization and then use that marketing organization to feed it into my sales process, then I think we start having all the goodies from our service domain into our organization, and we can start initiating that change. And we can have small loops. Well, this is what I would like to share with you from making a transition of seeing the goodies of service, tapping that into the sales organization, and instead of competing each other, start working together. And then I think we have the starting grain for change. Thank you. Okay. Next, I would like to introduce our first speaker from ABB, Richard Windischhofer, and he will talk about IoT, but he will use a different definition of IoT, because it's not Internet of Things, it's Internet of integration of...
You mean technology, services, and people?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much. By the way, that is ABB's definition for the Internet of Things. It is about integrating things, services, and people, and the Internet, of course. My background is in business transformation and change leadership. I joined ABB 5 years ago or 6 years ago. Started in the service organization, and now I'm working in the. I'm responsible. I have a responsibility in the overall business unit, which is basically business development and integrated operations. And with integrated operations, we mean our digital transformation. So what we did is we introduced a lot of different elements, digital elements, software, cloud technologies, and etc. And that affects every product, every process, all our departments, all our customers. So for that, we basically created an overall initiative, and I'm leading that one since a couple of years. And what I'd like to show you now is a live look into our integrated operations center in one of these. We're launching them this year all over the world. So I'm wondering if we have my colleague on the line. Okay, Stian, good morning. Can you hear me? I cannot hear you now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so Stian, I'm not sure if you can see the audience. There is hundreds of people sitting here, but no pressure.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, so Stian is the global head of our technical support, and that used to be the sort of traditional service center or service centers we have in our business unit, which is responsible for marine and for ports. We have 22 service centers all over the world, and you can imagine the ships are moving, for example, so you really have to be able to serve one customer, whether in the same way and respond quickly, whether he's in Singapore and calls you, or whether he's with his vessel just somewhere in the Baltic Sea. So we have fully globalized that kind of service operation, and Stian is heading the global technical support. Stian, why don't you show us basically what we can see here behind you?
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. I'll give you a short introduction to what we see behind me here. First, maybe some background information on the Integrated Operations Center here in Billingstad, Norway. The center was opened back in November 2015. We are 14 technical support engineers working out from the center here, supporting an installed base of roughly 3,400 vessels with ABB equipment on board. We've recently opened similar centers in other countries as well, Helsinki, Finland, Singapore, and we're expanding into the Americas as well by end of 2016, which enables us really to have a 24/7 eye on our customers. So moving over to the information you see behind me here, on the center screen, this is our fleet portal. Here we are keeping track in real time of our remote diagnostic systems, the vessels where we have our remote diagnostic systems installed. We have an installed base of close to 200 vessels where we have capabilities to connect from the centers within marine service. And the information we see here is a couple of things. First of all, we are integrated towards a third-party supplier of vessel positions, so we know the exact position of all the vessels that we are monitoring. Maybe more importantly, we are also connected to the onboard systems. So this means that we are receiving KPIs and data in real time. First of all, we are monitoring the connectivity to the vessels that we have our remote diagnostic systems on board. This is very important for us. The vessels, they have a service agreement with ABB, and we have certain requirements within that agreement to be connected to the vessel within 1 hour, for example, if there should be a critical incident on board. We are also monitoring the onboard systems, as I mentioned, IT systems, if the diagnostic computers are on, if the connectivity to the ABB equipment is okay or not, so meaning OPC connection, Modbus connections, and so on. If there should be issues with any of this, then we also are immediately notified of that, as data quality and data consistency is very important for us here in order to troubleshoot and also perform analytics of all the data we are collecting. In addition, should there be a critical incident on board, for example, this is also something that our operators normally sitting here are immediately notified of. So we have implemented quite advanced functionality to detect these critical incidents on board. I mean, we're not very interested in catching normal faults created by maintenance activities on board and so on. We only want to focus on the critical faults. So we're doing this by combining several signals and variables from the equipment we are monitoring to really filter out only the critical issues. On the left screen, this is a stream of events coming in from all the vessels that we are monitoring, everything from maintenance-related events to alarms, faults, and these critical faults that are very important for us. In case there is a critical trip on board, what happens is that our system takes a snapshot of that critical trip, automatically packs it and sends it back to the ABB cloud. That means that our engineers, they have access to this data offline and can immediately start analyzing and troubleshooting the data. What we do in case of these critical issues is that we always contact both the onboard crew and also the onshore personnel in these cases to inform them and offer our assistance. With the systems that we have on board, we are really capable of going all the way down to pinpointing component failure in ABB equipment. I'll try to show you one example. I'm not sure how much details you can see in your end. But basically, this shows you some data from a medium voltage frequency converter that is representing a huge install base on board our vessels. So here we see a very small snapshot from a fault incident. There was a seismic vessel sailing with 3 propulsion motors. One of the propulsion motors tripped out on overcurrent. At that time, our operators here were immediately notified of a critical incident. At the same time, the data was transferred to the ABB cloud. And what you see here is really high resolution data showing the phase currents, and we're down to 100 microseconds here. So we can really pinpoint, for example, if this was semiconductor related, we can really analyze the phase currents and really go down and tell the crew which component is faulty. At the same time, we have, of course, capabilities to connect to the vessel we are supporting. By that, we are sharing the same screen with the onboard crew or even the onboard service engineer. This is also often the case that we will have an ABB engineer on board. He might be stuck on a complex problem on board, and then we scramble product system experts here that can assist from remote. Another very important aspect is what you see on the right screen here. This is a dashboard we've built for the operators here on top of our case management tool. Richard mentioned that we have 22 marine service centers around the world. We're all using the same case management tool, meaning that we have a single point of contact for all our customers, regardless of where the vessel is operating. They know if they have technical issues, they have one telephone number and one email address to call. This is a huge benefit. Also within the 22 marine service centers, we have full transparency. So basically we can have a Brazilian service engineer or technical support engineer supporting a vessel. If he's stuck on a case, he can easily transfer that case to a system expert here in Norway, in Singapore, or in Helsinki, for example. That was mostly related to the electrical systems that we are monitoring on board. Of course, we also have the ABB advisory systems, which is more looking into route optimization, weather advisory, energy efficiency, and so on. And there we have separate competence centers in Dalston and also in Helsinki. I mentioned now the important aspect of the troubleshooting part, but of course we collect a lot of data from the ABB equipment that we are monitoring, and we are doing a lot of analytics on that data as well. To give you one concrete example of something we're implementing these days is what we call smart alarms. Normal protection systems on board are typically based on low alarms, high alarms, high alarms, and so on. So by that time, it's typically quite late, or maybe even too late to detect problems with the ABB equipment. So we're now implementing functionality to detect these failures much earlier. One concrete example is, for example, cooling system of a frequency converter. We can now, instead of looking at the input pressure reaching a low limit, we can see if it has a falling trend or a rising trend, and we can then issue a smart alarm to the onboard crew and to the operator here so that we can handle issues before they actually result in a trip of propulsion or drilling or related to the power system. I think that was a short introduction here, Richard. Is there any questions from your side?
Thank you, Stian. I think at this moment, because I also have a couple of slides, basically how we did it. So I thought maybe now we could take a few questions directly to Stian.
If you have any questions, we take them on the microphone so that he can hear us. Anyone have a question? Anybody?
People are still speechless, Stian.
Fantastic. Here we go.
If you have a problem somewhere, is it considered an opportunity to expand on an SLA, or is the persons manning the service strictly technical?
I heard in the intro here that it was mentioned, that service engineer are also sales engineer, and this is something that we have been working hard on for some time now to also, encourage our service engineers when they are on board, not only to perform the job that they are intended to do, but also focus on opportunities on board. So, for example, mapping all the ABB equipment on board, promoting upgrades for the existing equipment on board. So there's absolutely technical personnel involved, but we are trying to train them to become at least capable of promoting available upgrades and service products.
Excuse me. Just one moment. Running the microphone around the room. Here we go.
Good morning. You just mentioned you have an on-site or on-board engineer looking after the ABB equipment, but the ship has a lot more equipment. So if you have an engineer there who is technical very skilled, commercially very well skilled, being a trusted advisor on board, aren't there any other opportunities to have much higher impact on board and have a better value proposition? Is that something you're thinking about or working on?
I didn't catch the whole question. Maybe Richard, can you fill in on this one?
I can also answer it. The crew on board, Stian was talking about the crew on board. So in that case, we actually, instead of sending a service engineer, as we used to do earlier, where you imagine, it's a highly technically skilled person, he travels 12 hours or even 24 hours sometimes to the vessel, then he works effectively 2-3 hours to fix the problem, and then he travels back, right? So instead we actually analyze it, and then we really coach the crew and instruct them, of course with the correct spare parts on site, that's what they have to have there, but then we actually instruct them to really fix the problem and get up and running again. So we have, with that, on medium voltage drives, we have actually reduced the need to send service engineers on board by 70%. So it's actually nowadays more the exception that we would send someone.
I misunderstood. I thought you said that on board you would have your engineer, but that's not.
No, it is the electrical engineer part of the crew. And I think this is very important, that we really, all the technology that we have developed and that we are using, it is developed by doers for doers. So it's on our side, the field service, it's the technical experts in the office, and the same thing also on the customer side. We're thinking about the people who are in the engine control room, on the bridge, etc. They come first, and then the people who might use also data from there on the whatever smart app or something in the boardroom, they come second, basically.
Yeah, it may be a silly question, or I didn't quite understand it, but if I understood it correctly, yes, you are remotely monitoring ships all over the world, and you're looking at the systems and looking at how they're performing, and as soon as you see something is going to fail, you're going to warn somebody on board, right? What's the benefit over just having a beeper on board that says, beep, this system is going to fail, or a monitor on board that's going to inform the people? Why does it have to be remotely?
Of course, the engineers, and Stian, did you hear that question?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the engineers, they can also see these alarms on board anyway. But very often you actually do not have the competence on board to really fix these problems. So in some cases, let's talk about a non-critical alarm. You might find out that actually instead of really fixing the issue, it's someone just presses the button to make the alarm go away, and that might happen 100 times, 200 times. So it is, you actually really need to deal with the problem, and for that you need the expertise, and you usually don't have that on board, especially with today's sophisticated equipment, but even with really old installed base. Thinking about ships, they operate 20, 30 years, so you might have automation systems out there that are quite old. You might not even have the right crew, or very few people who know how they work. And in that case, we might not use actually the remote monitoring and the remote detection of the alarms. But if you have a really good link to the OEM or the manufacturer of this, and really easy access to the expertise, they can still help you a lot. Yeah. Good. Okay. Stian, thank you, but you're going to stay on the line?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah? Okay, all right. So then I'm going to show you still a few points on how we did this transformation. If I could have the PowerPoint up here, thank you. I think also yesterday, and that's why I like to come to these events, I think Kopperberg is very good in getting people to talk with each other. So yesterday also the dinner was a very good exercise. And I think when you listen what people say, it's obviously, there is two groups sort of. One group is people who come here in order to sell something. And the other group is here because they're planning some kind of transformation, probably, and they really want to learn new. But I think that's also what the salespeople have in common, because salespeople are usually very good listeners. At least they should be. So I think this is something a joint interest that we have is how to transform, how to make something change, how to make something happen. And one of the problems really with changing field service is that there is an issue with the interdependency. So basically whatever happens in your company, in your value chain, whether it's something in engineering or in commissioning or in the warranty department, whatever, in supply chain management, in product management, if you have some issues there, you will have them eventually show up in field service. So field service eventually deals with all these issues. And I think to really transform the field service, you have to start at the root, which means it's quite a big transformation. So you have to address the causes in many different departments of your business. So how to do that? There is, of course, also there is two important factors. Unfortunately, yesterday I missed the change management presentation, but we discussed this topic also at dinner. There are two important factors. One obstacle is culture. It's existing ingrained habits, routines, processes. Very often it's also, people just love to call it culture, but it's actually chaos. So you have to deal with that. And the other thing is very often there's a lack of leadership or attention, lack of timing, lack of funding, lack of use cases, incentives, and so on. What I'm saying is that basically if you want to transform a business or a service department or service operation, you should not start with the culture. We have not started with the culture at all. Because actually if you look at it, it comes back to the second point. So the work really for the transformation it's only 20% culture and 80% it's these other things. So you have to understand that, I mean, for example, we are a global organization, we have 22 service centers. If we would be talking about culture, okay, we cannot implement this in Singapore because, we cannot implement it in China because, and we cannot implement it in Netherlands because, you actually get into a kind of, you start to find excuses why you cannot change. And that excuse is then we cannot do it because, you know, there's a certain cultural, a certain way of operating. I'm not even talking about cultural differences, but just different ways of operating, how these people have learned over the last decades to operate. And I think if you really look into very closely into these units, you will find that there is a good reason why changing is difficult. One unit might have a record order backlog, so they have to execute the backlog before they can implement your 5 initiatives that you want them to implement this year, for example. In other cases, I think you might implement something, you might do a technology migration, but there is not enough funding, there is not enough resources. So is it really realistic to expect from people who are working in a relatively small team, who do some development, do some installation work, for example, and at the same time some product maintenance, is it realistic to expect from these people also to take care of a technology migration or tool migration? Probably not. So these are, I think, this is like that's the real work. I would call it the hard work, where you have to listen to the people and really understand why are things not changing. 90% of these things, they are not excuses, really. People always have a good reason why they cannot do what you want them to do at this moment. And it's the job, I think, also of the management to listen and to give them the resources and to help and to support. I think also very often it's actually a problem that the plan is too complicated, or that you start with the wrong people. But I'm still going to come to that. So I think the work is really on the bottom, that's the 80%. And if you do that well, the culture changes. You don't have to fight the culture. There is no big kind of cultural transformation that you have to focus on, because people see the change, they start working accordingly, and then a year or 2 years down the line, you will notice that you have really changed the culture. So, now having said that, what happens in field service, it actually, what you see there, and if you want to change something there, it depends on a lot of other things. Now that means that service usually does not control all the inputs that affect the performance of service, because it comes from the other departments. That means if you only manage your service change initiatives as service change initiatives, it's not enough. You have to go a level higher. You have to go to that management level to which engineering, sales, service, technology, R&D, to which you have to go to that level to which these functions report to, which means you have to really make it a business strategy. Especially in this day and age where we talk about digitalization and, for example, getting new software and sensors right from the new building phase, in our case, into installed basically at the greenfield project. Now that means that you have to agree with your suppliers, with the factories, already to put the sensors in at the factory. And to do that is usually, that's very far from what the service department usually does. Then you're going to talk about the business model, for example, and when you talk about business model, it means that, well, is service going to pay for it, or the systems business, or new sales, because service gets the profits, but who gets this and that? So we did not want to have that discussion anymore, which means we really made it our business strategy, and then the business model was also clear. So basically nowadays we do a lot of things, a lot of investments in service, for field service, etc. And these investments, they're carried by the entire business unit. So there is no discussions really about, okay, what is the business model? It's really it's yesterday for us. Also, I think when you talk about changing things, very often in engineering organizations, it's the technology organization that leads kind of certain development projects. It might be, for example, to implement a new monitoring feature in a product, or whatever, create a new generation of a kind of an integrated system delivery. We, for example, are integrating automation systems with the power package and with the propulsion. And I think if you have that led by the technology department, it's going to be very much technology focused. But what we did is we really to make the business leaders responsible and make them take the lead. So that means all the management that has a P&L responsibility in our business, they are passionate about it. They take the leadership. And I think that's a big difference. When you have really the management, those who really control the P&L, excited about the change and be interested and give it its attention, and not have, let's say, someone, a program manager just in service or a technology manager try to make something happen. I think then things can really happen. I think another thing also that we did a couple of years ago, we noticed that actually service probably has the best understanding of how the customers want to operate, because you meet the customer every day. And service has a tendency to assume that others know just as well as they do, but that's not true. So no one meets the customer more often than the service people, which is also why we actually created our transformation out of the service organization. But that means that you have to explain how your customers operate and how they want to operate in the future. You're going to have to explain that to a lot of other people. You have to explain it to the new sales, you have to explain it to the head of the business unit, to the controller, to the head of operational excellence, to the head of supply chain management, etc. So you really have to build the understanding of how the customers want to operate in the future. Do not assume that everyone in your organization knows that. And I think that's really important. So there is a kind of an ambassador function to that. The other thing is also, we really looked at it and said, okay, this is what we're doing. Why are we doing it? On one hand, it generates new growth and orders. So for us, this is what you saw, and from Stian there, we actually used that in our sales. We are not expecting our salespeople anymore to study 500 PowerPoint slides to understand what we're selling here. No, we have built these things, these centers, and the salespeople are expected to give a demo to the customer. And that's actually much easier. Because you could just bring a salesperson in, you can train the person in the operations center, you can say, look, these are the different solutions that we're using, join us for half a day, work with us, and after a while he can already have a fluent conversation with the customer about these things. That also means we have stopped showing PowerPoint slides to our customers, to a large extent, of course. It's not possible to eliminate it completely, which means in our customer meetings, we open a live link like this, which means you are really using that, you show your capability. You're not just saying we have monitoring. No, you just say, hey, you want to talk to the monitoring guy? And by the way, that's also a cost saving, because otherwise he might have traveled with the salesperson to the customer just to give it this credibility that you have the expert sitting there. Well, now he can still talk with the expert, but he didn't have to travel. And it really, I think it shows how in that case, actually, all of these changes, if you do them, they really pay off also for the sales. The other thing is you really have a big cost-saving opportunity here, because you can increase the productivity. Like I said in this example with the service engineer, if you do not have to send these highly qualified people to the ship, they can, instead of repairing 50 ships a year, they can repair 500 remotely with the help of the crew. And you make the customer a lot happier, because the downtime goes from 1 day or 2 days or whatever, it goes to 1 hour, for example. One thing also is, I think you have to make your organization and the management really wake up that the customers, so I think many of us have large companies or industry leaders as their customers, and I think they are all modernizing their backbone. So they are all in the next 10 years going to implement a new digital backbone, integrated supply chain, ERP systems, operations execution systems, and whatever, automated spare part management and whatever. And that means that if they are fixing their processes and you are not fixing their processes, they cannot work with you anymore. They need to choose someone else who has implemented a modern day backbone. And I think that's a big pressure. I think the last thing here is you need to really, there is a saying that goes that no one cares about what you say as long as they don't know how much you care. So this is really about having the people who are so committed, who say that, okay, you're not yet getting what I'm saying, but let me come back to you in a week, and you're going to come back in another week, and again and again and again. You really have to be committed to make this happen, because this is something that people do not understand at the first meeting. I think so. Just a few things here. Still, this is my last slide. How did we really make this happen, or how did we get started? What we did is actually we picked all the different experts that we needed. We looked at it. How many initiatives do we have running in R&D and in tool implementation or whatever? We found like 20 different initiatives. We pulled them all together, managed them as one program. And then we put experts in charge. So basically people who were already familiar with the issue. And I think, getting 25% of the time of someone who is really familiar with this already is better than hiring someone new who needs to learn for the first 1-2 years what this is about. So I think here it's really about building a team and then also putting the business in the lead. So the program management and my role, I'm from the business, so it has a strong business drive what we are doing. I think also the other thing is you really have to use what you have, especially in the beginning. I mean, first of all, companies have the tendency to use consultants, management consultants for the advice and whatever. But if we would just listen to our customers and to our own people and write down what they are saying we need to do and then do that, I think then you already come a long way. And you don't have to make huge technology investments, because you can already, with what you have and the investments and the initiatives you are already operating, if you just combine them and you manage them better, you really implement them better, you're going to get a lot more return on investment on your money that you're already spending on development. So it's not about immediately asking for another 10 million or whatever. This is really not what it should be about. And I bet that all of you have started this transformation already. Then one thing is really important is you have to build a prototype. You have to work with the unit with those units that are the first believers, because some people need to see it in order to believe it. That's 90% of people, but there are a few people who don't need to see it first. They actually believe it when you say it, and they say, hey, this is good, you know what, let's do that. Well, work with these guys first, make the prototype, and then show it to the others. Then they will say, oh, now I get it. Okay, all right, hey, this is good. We already have the first one, so how about we do the next one? We're going to do it a little bit differently so that it fits us, but it's going to be fine. So this is, how to really get the ball rolling. Now, of course, sales. Just these 2 points. So one thing, of course, when we come to sales, we have simplified our offering. Earlier, we had like 50 or 60 different kinds of product names and whatever. We have created a modular offering. There is only six services basically. You can go to our website and look at them there. So I'm not gonna go very much into detail. But the message here is you have to make it simple. You have to make it digestible. It's actually not, when we talk about new IoT-based services, digital services, we're not talking about a big portfolio. It's actually pretty simple. And this is my last slide. I think really the whole point of our transformation has been that we do something for the people. We want to create something, and our inspiration, or my inspiration, has been the iPhone, actually. We wanted to create something that's so good that it makes people operate differently. And it needs to be flexible. And when we created these operation centers, also the tool implementations, everyone is complaining about it. It's so difficult to make people change and do this and that. I can tell you that if you change your service center and you basically give something modern, something a new infrastructure to the people with the right tool, there is a lot of people that automatically start working like this because now you're proud of it. You want to work differently. You know that, okay, I'm not going to go back to the old days. But for that, you have to take a little bit of money into your hands. It's not much. But you're going to create something that can be a vehicle for change. If you have this, once you have this, implementing every next tool or feature or version of whatever is much easier because this is a vehicle for change. You have the people there, they are ready to always, spin the wheel, and the ideas are coming from the customers. We also integrated with our customers' operation centers. So they bring us ideas that, hey, how about you do this dashboard, etc. So it's completely natural that you start to work in a very innovative way. Of course, we always have the sales in mind as well. And the way how I want to finish is that this is really something that has changed our conversation. I think from earlier that, you talk about service and field service in a way that, okay, it's the department of trouble, and you come in the morning at 8 o'clock, and by 9 o'clock you're doing something totally different that you were not planning to do that day. So this way of operating has really changed, and with that we are able to attract better people, or I'd like to say we are able to retain those great people that we have, because there's a lot of great people and they want to work this way. It's the same thing like on a ship, the crew. Nowadays, a good ship, a modern vessel, attracts a really good crew, and it's the same thing here. So at the end of the day, I think we can talk all about change and strategies and so on, but you have to listen to your people, to your customers. You have to understand who operates this, how do they operate, and then you also have to just start doing it, not even making the biggest plans, etc. But you have to start small, and it needs to be concrete. And I think this has been our mantra here. But I'd like to stop here. Thank you very much for your time.